Today I'm going to talk about Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was a post-impressionist artist. He was born in 1839 and was born in Aix-en-Provence, France. Paul Cezanne's father was a successful lawyer and also co-founder of a banking firm. His father urged him to become a lawyer as well as he was and follow in his footsteps. However, Cezanne had a great passion for art. His ultimate aim was to paint a masterpiece. Cezanne attended many drawing classes in childhood, but as well as in 1861 he followed his father's wishes and attended law school at the University of Aix. However, in April 1861, Cezanne withdrew from law school and pursued Paris in being fully committed into being an artist. In Paris, Cezanne met many Impressionist artists who he was very fond of. However, he differed from their views and wanted to make his own approach. He also met his wife Hortense Piquet, and they eventually had his son Paul Cezanne Jr. However, his friends and family did not approve of his wife, and for that reason they spent many years in separation, and Cezanne actually hid his son from his father for a long time because he didn't want him to withdraw his monthly allowance that his father was sending him. The Paris Salon was an exhibit created for what was traditional successful art. Cezanne submitted many pieces that were, refused, and only one of his artwork was actually accepted to be exhibited. This salon was created for artists to show their work to critics and buyers and the public as well. The artists who were rejected from the Paris Salon created another exhibit for kind of the outlaws of art called the Salon des Refusés. Several artists were refused from the Paris Salon, so they decided to bring their work that they thought was successful and show it in their own way. Cezanne also showed many pieces in this exhibit. This is an example of a more traditional piece of work. This is by Eduardo Leon Cortes in 1882. As you can see, the depth is very easy to decipher. The smaller buildings are in the back. This larger front building is in the front. These people who are larger in the front are obviously closer. The wagon is farther. It's quite simple. However, Cezanne's work differed enormously from the more traditional. This was a painting he created later in his career called The Seating Man. There's not much detail, and you can't really decipher the depth as well as the other image I just showed you. His art was criticized throughout his whole life for looking unfinished and lacking artistic ability. He went through a lot of criticisms. Cezanne's art wasn't lacking artistic ability. He had a different approach to his work, that he wanted his viewers to see his work and use their imagination to read it. As you can see, the difference of these two images is, quite simple. This is more detailed, and this you have to read. You have to put yourself emotionally into this to decipher what is where. Spending nearly a decade in Paris, Cezanne never succeeded as well as he had hoped. In 1870, nearly 10 years after leaving Aix-en-Provence, Cezanne left and returned home. This was the same time the French and German War began, and Cezanne wanted to leave Paris because he was not succeeding, but as well as he was avoiding being drafted into the war. Returning home, his father provided financial stability for Cezanne. He was able to have a secluded artistic approach to his work, and his work grew enormously from this. Pieces of significance. The first one I chose was the father of the artist, reading Le May. It was created in 1866 and was in oil on canvas. This piece is very significant because to me it represents the tension between him and his father's disapproval of him being an artist. It was very dark and thick pigmented, and he also used a palette knife creating this. This image isn't significant just because of the relationship between him and his father. It is also the only piece that was accepted to the Paris Salon. As you can tell, it's very dark, and the background is hard to decipher. This was created in his early dark period, what they would call his dark period. He used dark colors and thick amounts of paint. As if to force the issue, Louis Auguste, Cezanne's father, is portrayed reading a liberal newspaper, which is highly unlikely as he was well known for his conservative outlook. The next piece I chose was Main Sainte Victoire with large pine. It was created in 1887 and was in oil on canvas. This image is significant because it represents his home. This was a mountain outside of Aix-en-Provence that Cezanne went back to several times, recreating this image throughout numerous pieces of work. And he always had a different approach to it. He would sit at a different angle, use different colors, mirror the image actually. It shows happiness of his home, so I think that he interpreted that into his work as well. It's also significant because the series of this mountain was shortly after he returned home, when his artistic approach started expanding. He used geometrical shapes more, he used color to build structure more, and you can definitely tell in the piece of work. Once again, it's pretty flat, it's hard to decipher depth. You don't really know what's what. You have to kind of use your imagination, really look into the piece. And it does, in fact, look unfinished because it's not very detailed. But, I mean, you can see some buildings and a bridge and obviously the mountain and the tree. But everywhere else is kind of a blur. You really have to dig deep and decipher what you want to see. Cezanne was indeed known for his landscapes of Mount Saint Victor. The last piece that I have chosen was the Large Bathers. It was created in a 7-year period, from 1898 to 1905. This piece was also in oil on canvas. It was the largest of the series. Cezanne created an enormous series of nude women bathing by a river or a lake, or every piece that was nude was actually from his imagination because he never really had nude models. This painting represented the great leap of structure and geometrical shapes he interpreted into his work. He also used a lot of abstractness into this as well. This painting was finished shortly before his death, and it represented to me, the great difference between his beginning works and his later works. I mean, there's just a remarkable difference. He utilizes the triangular shape in this. You can see clearly that the people are symmetrical and triangles, as well as the trees. And once again, it's not very detailed. It's more detailed than the others. I mean, you can obviously see people, but in the background, you'd have to really look into it and decipher what you would put where. The depth is more of depth here because you see the background and things are smaller and these are larger, as in the Mount St. Victor. Cezanne's contributions was enormously impactful to young artists. He stepped outside of the realms of the traditional ways and didn't care what people said about his work, criticized, or anything. He kept going. He wanted to make an impact to people to be unique and be themselves. He painted approximately 650 watercolors and 850 oils. However, many are still uncounted for. Cezanne was an amazing artist. He influenced so many young artists to pursue the realms of the outside of the traditional ways. He utilized geometric shapes and color to form structure, and more traditional pieces were clear and you didn't have to really look into them. Cezanne wanted his viewers to dig deep into their minds and use their imagination to decipher what they saw in his art, not necessarily make it clear for people just to see it and move along. He still today influences artists around the world to be unique and prosper outside of the traditional ways, which is why I believe that the world is so ever-changing. Generally categorized as post-impressionist, his unique method of building form with color and an analytic approach to nature influenced art of Cubists, Faves, and suggestive 5 generations of avant-garde artists. Paul Cezanne said, "Treat nature by the cylinder, the sphere, and the cone." Thank you.